Support a kinder, more mindful community. Awaken Pittsburgh's end of year fundraising campaign is happening now. Help us continue to provide essential programs by donating today. Every act of kindness counts. Visit awakenpittsburgh.org to give. Hello, friends. My name is Stephanie Romero, and I am the founder and executive director of Awaken Pittsburgh. I want to welcome you to our podcast, The Ripple Effect. Awaken Pittsburgh is a nonprofit dedicated to fostering well-being, empathy, and compassion for all by teaching and encouraging mindfulness and meditation practices. I also want to take a moment to let you know that Awaken Pittsburgh offers many other opportunities for practice and connection. For example, you can join our online community, which features a space to more deeply explore the topics we cover with our guests. We have weekly posts to spark thought, practice, and reflection. I hope you will come join us to explore, connect with others, and deepen your practice. You can find out more at awakenpittsburgh.org. Well, Brandon, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You and I have been working together probably 2 years now, maybe a little more.
Yes,
And we've had some interactions, but not a deep conversation. So I'm kind of excited to have that opportunity.
me too. It's been a great journey doing the work with Awaken Pittsburgh as well as the University of Pittsburgh. And so, this idea of a mindfulness journey, learning it, putting it into practice has been a great journey for me. And even taking some of the courses that Awaken has offered helped me gain greater insight into how beneficial mindfulness can be for myself as well as those I try to serve in life.
Yeah, so that's the perfect segue to the question that I always start with is just about what has been the role of meditation or mindfulness in your life and yeah, maybe how it supports you in your own mental health journey.
Right. So in 2015, I made a transition. I had worked in early childhood for about 9 years with Pittsburgh Public Schools. Loved that work. Had an opportunity to help, engage with children of early childhood age as well as their parents for so long. And I think the work was beneficial, not very taxing as it felt natural to me. I did transition to becoming a school counselor, which I feel like is natural, comes natural to me too. And there were moments though when the work was taxing me. So I would say that's when I had come to learn about mindfulness and the ability that I had to be able to accept emotions as they would come up, also experience them, maybe sit in them at times, but also recognizing that those emotions aren't a fixed experience, right? And that they would come and go. I often like to speak of emotions like waves, and I'll say something to people like, "Have you ever been to the ocean?" We live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so I'll say, "Have you been to the Allegheny River?" And so, if you have, you'll see sort of how waves may be very large at the beach, and then they come, crashing in, or they come slowly and gently in, and then they go back out. In the same regard, I feel our emotions occur, maybe sometimes big, maybe not. Sometimes as big as waves occur.
I love that metaphor of the emotions coming in and out like waves, especially when we're working with kids. Those kind of visual imagery is so important for them to understand kind of abstract concepts, right? So
True,
that's
true, and
beautiful.
and so as you're trying to serve others, and you're trying to make sure you're resourced yourself to serve. I just fell in love with mindfulness as a way to help me regulate and just know where I'm at when I show up to work. And I've even begun to, over time, practice at home as a parent of three children, a husband, a son, and a cousin. All those things. It becomes even more important to resource when you're not at work as well.
I love that. We all need to be reminded that if we are serving others, we need to be working to resource ourselves so that our cup doesn't run dry, so we don't burn out, so we can stay in the work, because it can be taxing, it can be draining, it can be heavy, especially when we're working with populations that have a lot of trauma, uh, have a lot of need. It can take its toll, but we have to be working continuously and reminding ourselves continuously to be resourcing ourselves as well. Is there a particular practice or practices that you love that really lift you up when you're feeling down?
So, yes, oftentimes I would say during the past 2 years, I found myself generally starting my day, taking care of my needs, showering, maybe having a bite to eat, something to drink, and then having to take my son to school. One of the things I started midway last year was to leave him with an affirmation. One of the things I try to say the same affirmation every day when I drop him off, which is, "You're brilliant beyond measure, gifted beyond your own understanding, and God got you." And so, in the same way, I try to read affirmations as well as African proverbs to just stay positive, but also to be real about the work and the evolution of our society. Things are ever changing, and as a school counselor working with children, no 2 days are the same. That's one, and the other at times is if I'm feeling like disconnected in a way, like, wait, I'm not really doing my best, uh, doing body scans, right? Um, just to recognize where I might need to stretch, or where I might need to ice or take a bath, or even just try to move, right? And so a body scan, I believe, allows me, speaking for myself, it allows me to recognize those maybe areas where I'm tight, stiff, or just, uncomfortable.
I love that. And I know, like, for me, I get sucked into my work, which is very mental, and I disconnect from my body a lot of the time. So I'm not even noticing. And then the end of the day will come and I'm like, oh, I'm so tense up in my shoulders and my neck. And you realize, like, oh, I've been holding that all day, you know?
Right.
So building in that pause to just check in, which I always try to do at my lunch break. Like, I schedule a lunch break and I try to do it. So I love that you're saying body scan, because sometimes I think when people think of meditation, it's all about the brain and the thinking,
True.
right? It's this practice that we work with our mind. And that's true. But if we're not also working with the body, and connecting mind and body, we're missing something big and important. So thank you for naming that.
Yeah, the other practice that someone gifted me the first experience of this is something called floating. The best way I can put it is, you know, we're always experiencing something sensory, even as we're sitting and relaxing, maybe in the most comfortable or cozy of chairs. Our body is supporting itself in the seat, and so when you float, again, this is more of a physical sort of mindful experience for me. You're able to literally let your body just go, and there's so much salt in the water. You just float, and oftentimes I would say if I've floated maybe only 5 times in my life, because it does require that you take like 60 minutes and set aside. I would say probably 3 times I've fallen asleep for some moment, or I felt like I've fallen asleep. So,
Yeah, I tried floating. So a few years back, a good friend of mine who's a meditator was like, Stephanie, you have to try floating. You're gonna love it. And it is like it is a meditation. Like it can be, depending on what you're doing with your mind while you're in there, right? It can be like a meditation. And it is a definitely, if you allow yourself to fully relax, a deep relaxation experience. Um, and it's so interesting because I geek out on this stuff. So forgive me if I get a little like into it. But if you think about the different ways we can meditate with our eyes closed, and that excludes some sensory stimulus, if you think about it, right? Or you
yes,
can meditate with the eyes open, and then you're bringing in the whole visual field. So floating is kind of like selecting a stimulus because the water's touching your skin, but you're in a dark space. Sometimes they play music, right?
yep,
So
mhm,
it's kind of playing with that sensory experience to
yes,
shift your attention around. So it's very interesting. So I'm so interested that you named that. And also, like I would love to, I don't know if there's research out there that I'm sure there is, but I've never Googled it. Like there's research on the brain states that we achieve through meditation. I'm really
yes.
curious if that lines up with the floating. I don't know if you know that at all, but that's just like a
Okay.
question that is so interesting to me.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. Now you make me want to think about it. I would say the few times when I didn't fall asleep, people might think it's different, but I felt like, my eyes were closed or it was dark and I was seeing things like not in a bad way. Like I felt safe. Um, I felt really comfortable when I got out. Maybe those 2 times when I didn't, fall or rest. But it would be interesting to see what the research says.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to Google it later.
Yeah, please share.
Maybe
Please share with me.
I will. If I find something, I'll share it with you. But I was also thinking, like, I always write a newsletter for Awaken. So, folks who are listening, I've got my newsletters probably planned till the end of December already. But come January, I might be doing something on floating.
Awesome, awesome. I'd love to come back and talk about it.
All right.
Particularly if I was able to do it close to a float. I haven't
Mhm.
floated since January. Again,
Okay.
you have to set aside some time, but yeah.
Maybe you got to put that on your Christmas wish list and someone could give you a gift card, right?
Yes,
Because that's what
yes.
happened with me. Somebody gave me, I think it was like Mother's Day or something. Someone gave me a gift card, and that's how I ended up trying it. Yeah. Cool. So our topic today is actually not floating, but it is kindness. And so I would love to hear from you, especially as someone who works with young people. This is such an important and timely topic. How do you see the relationship between mindfulness and kindness, your own meditation and mindfulness journey, and yeah, and working with kids? So important, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I believe mindfulness reflects kindness in that it gives space for us to offer, kindness to ourselves first. And that might look like what we need in some form, sort of thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like in that way. Um, but if we need a moment to acknowledge a past hurt or to celebrate happiness we receive maybe from a text, I feel like kindness works out in a similar way to like mindfulness. What I believe is and find is nice about mindfulness is we give ourselves permission to acknowledge how and or what we feel too. Um, that that right there isn't always encouraged. I don't know that that's the case in our society, um, but I think it's important for children to like be able to recognize what they feel, how they feel it, and then also be able to express it in some way.
I love, love, love that you named celebrate as one of the needs. Like you said, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then you say what we need, maybe recognize a hurt or a need to celebrate. I don't know if you phrase it like that, but that's what I heard you saying with
Hmm.
the needs. And I think so many times when people feel into what do I need right now, it's always like going to filling a void in a
Hmm.
negative way, like I have a pain or I have a something that I gotta fix.
Yes,
But a need could be a positive. A need, I have a need to be joyful. I need to celebrate like
yes,
that. I
yes.
especially with children, right? Because
So,
that's
right.
so automatic for them to come into the joy and come into the play. And as
Yep.
adults, we kind of like where's our need to play? Like where's our need to express joy? So that's
Hmm.
beautiful that you named that.
Yeah, for about a week now, I've been encouraging, children at lunch to spend the first 5 minutes focused on eating, and then the rest of the time talking, amongst themselves. I try to give uh, an encouragement to them, and it goes like this every day. I say it to them, and I was wondering when someone might ask or say like, "You can't have that," and so today a student did ask, and what I say to them is, "I want your bellies to be full, your heart to be full, and your mind's ready to learn." And I try to do the same motions every day. And so today said, "What do you mean your heart be full?" And I want them to be filled with joy, their heart to be filled with joy, the joy of learning. And so I did explain. I said, "You're so brilliant to ask that question." It was, sort of, making me anxious, like when someone's going to ask me about that. And so today a student asked. And so I think to be filled with joy, like you said, and to celebrate things is important.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And then the other piece that you named there is like self-kindness, right? Self-kindness. So there's the kindness that we show others.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's difficult to show
Yep.
a particular person kindness in a particular moment, right? We've all had those.
True. True.
Um, so there's
Yeah.
that, right?
I
But
would.
then there's
Yeah.
also the self.
Yeah. I would say like thinking about loving myself. I can remember my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, always encouraging me to feel good about myself, and definitely love myself. And more importantly, like I feel like at times they showed me how to love other people. I also can remember Mr. Rogers, telling us to be kind, but that he also loved us just the way we are. Right. I think that was like a quote. And both my grandparents and he showed like in different ways, like just through acts of kindness, whether it was my grandparents giving folks food or coffee or letting them have a place to stay. And so I can remember them often doing that, even beyond family, and realize like they were living out their kindness. So same with Mr. Rogers. I think he like washed someone's feet or something like that on one show, one episode.
So
Like the
that
policeman.
Yeah, that episode was super interesting. Apparently, I actually saw something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, because this was when he first started, it was the 70s, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so we're coming right out of the civil rights era. And there was an
Right.
incident in Pittsburgh at a pool where a black family was not allowed to swim in a white pool. And
Okay.
so in that episode of Mr. Rogers, he has a baby pool and it's filled with water and he has his feet in it and he's like it's really hot. And then I don't remember if it was the policeman or it had to be the policeman. I think you're right because the postman was that older guy. He had the policeman come and he had him put his feet in the pool to show that he was going to be in a pool with a person of color and that they were allowed to be in the pool with him. And then I think
Dang.
he got a towel at the end and dried his feet.
Try to see. Yes.
just
Okay.
to
Fantastic.
show, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no, we are all going to be swimming in the same pool together. Like
Yeah.
it was a political statement actually, but done in such a sweet, loving way. And if you actually, because there must have been a special or something that I watched on
Hmm.
the political messages of Mr. Rogers.
Wow. Okay.
So he took kindness in a 1960s, 1970s in a social justice framework.
Right. Right.
He kicked it up a notch, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, he talked about a lot of themes I remember,
Mm-hmm.
and some definitely stood out. Like I said, like kindness, and like you're saying,
Yeah.
kindness, and him sort of living it out and expressing it in that way.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that episode for a long time, but thank you for naming it because I think, yeah, he was a remarkable human in so many ways. Yeah. And especially on the kindness. He really did bring out the kindness. Yeah. So I'm curious if you have anything that you do as a practice, either with yourself or with the young people you work with, to help them cultivate their kindness, either towards themselves or towards other people.
Now, I would say that, one of the most important things that I do is we have restorative circles at school. And so there'll be times when, kids aren't seeing eye to eye, or someone says something about someone, or, if they hit someone. And so what I try to do is offer them the opportunity to express what happened. And then I connect it to how they felt, right? And, one of our expectations is to be kind. And so I usually try to relate it to, is that kind, right? So if a student says, someone hit me, and I say, how did you feel? Wow, I felt really sad, or I felt angry. I look to the person who was the actor. Was that your intent? Did you want them to feel, you know, sad, mad, angry, whatever feeling they may have felt? And sometimes it's yes, but more often than not, it's no, I didn't want to do that. And I'll say, wow, so was that kind what you did? And the answer is always like no. And so, okay, so what can we do differently? Right. And I offer both parties the opportunity to share how they felt. I think it's important for everyone to be heard. It I think it teaches one to recognize, how you feel. And there are a few um, children, in particular students, who I'll have check-ins with, and I'll ask them every day, like legit, how are you feeling? And sometimes I may say, "What's your goal? What was your goal? Did you have a goal? Like something you wanted to do today?" And generally will tell me, "Yeah, I wanted to go to like gym or art or music." And then I'll express like, "Hey, were you able to accomplish that goal? And if you weren't, was there someone you could help? You could ask for help."
Find it like fascinating that you're connecting this with the emotional check-in with the kids, right? And there's something there about it's really hard for us to be kind if we're dysregulated.
Yeah,
So that's like
yeah,
really, really wise what you're saying there. You know what I mean?
right, right. And I'm trying to not convince, but get kids committed to recognizing and acknowledging, like, you know, if I may feel a certain way, the way I'm going to respond generally is this. And then if the thing is like, wait, I'm hitting people because I felt angry, what can you do in those moments when you feel angry other than hit? And
Mhm.
so, in my past experience, there have been opportunities where kids would say, come to see you, maybe try some mindfulness, right? And
Mhm.
so I've had, singing bowls, chimes. I
Mhm.
feel like with younger students, it's been important for me, and this may, not be with all children, but it's been important for me to make sure, any moment of mindfulness, and which is I try to be intentional about calling it a moment, isn't too long, right? Their attention spans are very short, and so, if we're dealing with kindergarten through fifth grade, hey, let's not make this more than like 1, 2 minutes, if that.
Yeah.
Um,
That's really, really smart because they do have very small attention spans. But the other thing you're naming is with the bowls and the chimes is that the sensory experiences of mindfulness are like concrete focal points are really important for kids. Because for us as adults, we can like choose a mental object, like a thought
Hmm.
or an idea, and even an affirmation that's in our mind and just repeat
Yes.
it like a mantra or something. For a little kid, that's really, really hard. So having the auditory thing that they're focusing on or a physical thing they're focusing on, the what you're naming is really smart for kiddos that are especially real young ones, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even just trying to get them to take a breath. Like when you think about a breath, I mean, you kind of feel it, but you don't necessarily see it. So offering them an opportunity when we are trying to get them to take a breath to use a kinetic ball, like I call it a breathe ball, has been, helpful too. Bubbles, trying to think what else has been safe. Now, a ton of things, but some things are sort of just plentiful and you can use them again and again.
Yeah. Yeah, even just giving kids, like I love the breathing balls, I love the bubbles ideas, but sometimes even having them imagine it, like blow out the candles on your cake for the out breath and suck a milkshake through a straw for the in breath, something like that, where you're having them extend that breath so that they're really noticing that breath, right? You have to kind of give them a concrete connection, even with the breath for the littles.
Exactly. No, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and thinking a little bit more about in your own experience of kind of difficult situations or people, how do you, in your adult self, work with kindness when you're faced with people that, aren't being kind themselves?
Right. So when those situations, and interactions show up, I generally go to like, hmm, maybe what's going on? What's difficult for this person? Maybe, right? Or maybe there's something they need that they don't have, and this is where this difficulty is coming up. Or perhaps something happened to them, either that day or in their lifespan that has brought them to this. And so I've learned to sort of first try to understand, then consider, offering whatever it is I have to offer, because that's really kindness, right? Not putting my needs in front of other folks without considering theirs. It's been important to really uh, do that in a way that's non-threatening, right? And non-judgmental. Worked at working with kids. Some kids are more needy than others, but nonetheless, any of their needs, right? I think if you're trying to fulfill them and help them, support them, it's important that you ask, like, hey, what happened to them? Maybe what do they need? And so the the ability to do that, I think, kind of should, for me, it's been helpful, I think, with kids to like allow them to put their guard down so that if there are negative emotions, like, look, there's no expectations right now. I really want to help you.
I love that you're leading in the difficult situations with curiosity and compassion. Like that's what I hear from that response from you. You're leading with the curiosity of like what's happening with this person, what's underneath this, right? And compassion for something must be there. Something must be there.
Right. Yeah. Whenever I learned about trauma informed work, working as a school counselor, and I really sort of dug into the sanctuary model, I would say that's where I unearthed, right, in the commitments, and also sort of in the questions you ask here. How are you feeling? What is your goal? Who can you ask for help? Those things all, I mean, I kind of got into a debate with someone about like, well, can you measure kindness? And I was like, does it really matter? In the sense of like, shouldn't that be a goal you strive for? Because they were like, if we can't measure it, then we need not, incorporate it or cultivate it. And it's like, no, I think you should, right? I think if you're going to want to bring out the best in other individuals, you want to be kind. You want to sort of set up a space that's non-threatening, non-judgmental, opportunity for social learning, and building democracy.
Well, I mean, you could say the same thing about love.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like it's hard to quantify love,
Right.
but we
Yeah.
all want it. We all want
Yes.
it. We all want to feel loved, and it feels good to express love. But that, so just because you can't quantify it doesn't mean it's not worthy of encouraging and sharing and developing and all those good things. So good for you for pushing back on that one, because not every, like, I love research and I am a researcher, and there are things that are not so easily quantified that we still want in our life, right? That we still want to have in our life. Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to make a little bit of a leap from the personal to the social. My personal path in life really is around helping support individual people in order to create a better world for ourselves. I want to see society change for the better. And I'm just curious what you think about cultivating kindness, that individual versus collective relationship.
Right. So, one of my last years working at another school, I was faced with really digging deep into thinking about myself, but also really thinking about how society perceives me. And so I think that if more people in our society allow themselves to be vulnerable to connect, we would all understand we often share the same emotions, right? AKA struggles. And so I think kindness welcomes that. Kindness welcomes a sense of like, um, you know, us giving us the opportunity to be vulnerable. And that vulnerability, I believe, could allow us to share in more of the experiences we had, the emotions we've had, the ups, the downs, so that we all recognize that we share similar experiences. We're probably more alike than we're not. And, maybe we're afraid of what will happen next. Uh, in some ways, we may not know that we're afraid in similar ways if we don't connect, right? And so I think that in the broader context, my hope would be that people would think about when we look at kindness, we would think about the opportunity of creating a culture that allows us to really connect in some way. But to connect, it requires us to be vulnerable. And so I think that kindness would allow more folks to feel comfortable being vulnerable in some way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm taking what you said, and there's like two things standing out to me. One of them is intimacy, and that vulnerability is really about intimacy. We cannot have intimacy without vulnerability. And I think that it is a deep fear and a deep desire of all of us to be truly seen.
Agreed. No, I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think that overall, our culture that's promoted is kind of like an anti-relational culture. And I think if we could just move it a couple degrees and shift it to that of being more relational, we'd see more kindness evolve.
Yeah, I think you're naming something important. So my dad is from Southern Italy and I'm married to a Latino, and both of those sets of cultures are very collective oriented and not as fiercely independent as North American culture. And I see a real difference in, yeah, just like how people show up in those relationships. And I don't want to say good or bad, like there's something good and beautiful about both of those sets of cultures, but when you have more sense of the collective, right? You feel your responsibility to be present for others in a little bit of a different way, I think. And others will be present for you.
No, true, agreed. I totally agree. I think you know the idea though too that this culture of like not being vulnerable, so invulnerability, excuse me, is looked at sometimes and in some cultures, right, as like strong. And the reality is like, it's, you can say it's strong, but how disconnected are you, right? When you're not vulnerable, right? And how kind are you being to yourself if you're not willing to be vulnerable to to some group, right? And when I think about people who are in groups, and you think about how they say participating in activities with these groups, whether it be fraternal, whether it be faith based, sports, all those things, folks feel, I don't want to say complete, but they feel supported. I would say they feel loved. And in those networks of relationships, right, kindness is certainly there when you find out how often people support one another in so many different ways.
Yeah, that's a really good. I think that's why like churches in the United States and other social groups are so important, right? Because we don't always have those networks in other ways where we feel supported and cared for and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Well,
the other thing I was going to say too is like within the idea of being invulnerable, it's like, are you really feeling? Like, are you really experiencing any emotions? Like you said, if we're not allowing folks to see our truest self, our most organic self, are your emotions then real, or are they sort of a facade that maybe you carry around all day long, right? Um, yeah.
100%. And we know when we've squished down some emotions, a lot of other really positive emotions go too. Like you can't
Yes.
selectively dampen one emotion without
Mm-hmm,
other,
mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah,
it's like one off button,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
right? We know
Yeah.
this is true from research on emotions and emotional regulation. That when we don't want to feel something, a lot of other good, something that we view as negative, a lot of other stuff goes too.
Yeah.
I'm playing devil's advocate just a little bit. Like there are those moments where we do just have to tough through something. Like life is hard. Life is hard.
True.
So I don't think what you or I are saying is that you should just always be oozing kindness and gentleness. And like there are moments when you have to tough it through, right? It does happen. Like I
Yeah.
remember a few summers back, I was out, they redid my roof, and I was out maybe a few months after that, and I was cleaning my yard, and they had missed a nail, and it went through my foot, right? And so it was painful. I had to get myself inside, and I had to get the nail out of my foot, and I had to get myself to a place to get it looked at. And, what am I going to do at that time? The kindest thing was to tough it through because I had to do what I needed to do. I was here by myself.
Yikes.
and
Yes.
and that's real. Like life gives us stuff that's hard to deal with, and we do have to tough it through sometimes. And then afterwards I had a really good cry because it was really upsetting. Like I
Sure.
did, and I called my husband, and I was a hot mess, and I was like, this was so awful,
Yeah.
this is what happened, you know what I mean? And I allowed myself to feel all those emotions
Yeah.
afterwards,
For
but in the
sure.
moment I toughed it through, right? So
Yeah.
that's
No,
real.
I think it's so important to do that. And that's one of the things I try to say to my kids I work with now is like, it's okay to cry. If you need to cry, let's spend as much time getting that out, right? Sometimes because of anger, sometimes because of hurt, but whatever it is, like it's okay to cry. And like I'm willing to wait. Like we can wait, we can get this out. Let's work through this and experience it. Yeah.
Uh, for real. So, is there anything you want to add that I didn't ask about in terms of kindness?
No, nothing in particular. I feel like there are a lot of resources that I've had that have helped me on this journey. Again, Sandra Bloom's Sanctuary text.
Perfect.
Uh,
Yeah, that's what my next question was going to be. What resources would you want to share? I love Sandra Bloom's. She has a number of books, actually. I've read a couple of them, but I know she has more. And the ones that I've read have all been excellent. So
yeah,
that's a
anything about the
great one.
Sanctuary Revisited, those are awesome. I think if you're trying to build community, and I think naturally as human beings, that's a that's an important aspect for us is to connect with others. And so, also just when we think of kindness, having a basis for it, right, and not um, like a dictator kind of perspective, but a perspective that would be more democratic, more communal. And so I think Sandra Bloom's, text about, the sanctuary allows the reader to just get a framework for how they can go about navigating that. For me, recognizing is how important it is to be kind to myself. Don Miguel Ruiz, Four Agreements, are so important. Being impeccable with your word, not taking anything personal, not making assumptions, and always doing your best. And when you sort of lay all those things out, if you've done those things and like you've done your best, right? What more can you kind of do?
Yeah, that's such a great book. It's been around for quite a while now. It's not a new one, but it's so good. So
Right.
good.
Yeah. One of my mentors encouraged me to read that book because, there are times I'm an African American male, and so there are times maybe when I show up and I would question myself and maybe not be so kind to myself. And so that book really helped me to kind of develop a framework. Okay, like if I'm doing all these things, then like I don't know, maybe the other person has a need for something, or maybe something happened to them. Um, I mean, I know I've had experiences, a set of experiences I bring, but it sort of puts in perspective as to how I should move. And last but not least, about 2 years ago, I learned about bell hooks. My mother's a avid reader, a person with a degree in Africana studies, and I didn't even realize what that was all about until I got older. Most people might have parents who have like degrees in business or English or something. One thing I can say is that my mom has always encouraged me to, um, love myself, love who I am, my culture and such. And she introduced me to bell hooks. And so once I kind of was looking at bell hooks, she's a feminist. She has written some great books that are super supportive. And I was like, okay, how can I support, sort of this perspective and live it out? And she's written a book called We Real Cool. And so that book is Real Cool Black Men and Masculinity. And it's just all about sort of the perspective of our culture and such on Black men and maybe how we're perceived and how we're taught to behave and act and such. And so a lot of that book is, it might teach you that society as an African American male might not encourage me to be kind to myself or others in perpetuity. However, if I look inward, if I'm, willing to be like vulnerable, like I said earlier, as well as embrace others, I think that's where the real growth and connection happens is when I do those things. And that book taught me that.
Geez, Vernon, this conversation has just made my heart happy. I have to tell you, it's been so beautiful. And I love that you end with bell hooks because she's such an amazing human and writer and thinker, and has influenced me over the years in many ways. I didn't even know about that book. She has a lot out there, a lot of writing. So if you are listening and that particular one doesn't pique your interest, just Google bell hooks and
Yeah, the
see.
other the other book that I would say really, sort of encouraged me to look for more of her text was, Feminism is for Everybody. I, I feel like, we all come from a mommy, right? Like learning, and I think I heard Mr. Rogers say this at some point, like he doesn't eat anything that has a mommy, right? And realizing though, like in all seriousness, women are so important, right? And how does society, allow women to have ease and then to just show up to be their best selves? And I feel like we have a lot of work to do, right? But it gives me insight as a man, like to things I can do to support, um, sort of local, immediate, and beyond. And so, long live Bell Hooks, her spirit, right?
Yes, yes.
For sure.
Amazing human. Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been really wonderful. Thank you for sharing your journey and your wisdom and your experience with me. And I feel blessed that you are a collaborator of ours. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, I'm thankful to be here and trust this won't be the last time. I look forward to continuing doing the work we're doing. Mindful connection for Black families, and trust there'll be more.
Yes. Yes, we're working on that.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that work too has allowed me to think about like when folks show up and want to talk, like again, thinking from a perspective and a lens of being kind, would they be heard in other spaces? Perhaps no, like not to speak freely about how they're treated based on, being black or something like that. And so there's so much learning that happens, right? There's reciprocal relationships. I think some of the best education happens when teachers learn from students and students learn from teachers. So I try to live that out daily.
100%, 100%. And honestly, sometimes I think it's through young people or participants or students or whoever asking me great questions that I have deepened my own understanding of what I teach. It's that interactive, because they ask these fabulous questions. You're like, I never thought about that. That's a great question, So it makes you really sink deeper into your own knowing when you're teaching. So that's a beautiful thing as a teacher.
Yeah, no, for sure.
All
For
right.
sure.
Well, I'm going to end us there, let you go on to the rest of your day, and just appreciate you, Brandon. And thank you so much.
Yeah, I offer you my gratitude, for leading this work in our community and beyond. I believe mindfulness is a way for folks to maintain vitality as well as to create opportunities to be more relational, right? It's like, in a way, like coffee. Like, can you have a mindful moment with anyone? I would dare to say yes. It might look different with different folks, but we can all have a mindful moment together.
All right. Join us in spreading kindness and mindfulness this season. Awaken Pittsburgh's end-of-year fundraiser is in full swing, and your support can help us bring our transformative programs to those who need it most. Donate today at awakenpittsburgh.org.
Say Something Studios.